Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Wild Conversations. I'm George Buman with Yellowstone Life, and the topic of this week's conversation is spotting the weasel in your own backyard. Now, I'm not talking about the rascally kids next door that are up to mischief and no good. I'm talking about the actual animal, and believe it or not, most of you have weasels in your neighborhood. You just hardly ever see them. But if you are one of the lucky ones who's ever had a chance to spot one, you know that it's often very fleeting, and they are so fast, and especially if you live in an area with a lot of vegetation, they disappear in a hurry. But we're going to help you with that, because we actually had a fantastic encounter over a camping trip here not long ago with the family, where we got to see a weasel for over an hour, which is an extremely long viewing. So we're going to walk you through some of the things we observed during that, but also give you a little bit of information just about weasels in general, how we knew that the weasel was there, and how you subsequently can find out that there's a weasel in your neighborhood, and a little bit more about interpreting the behavior you see as a result. So weasels here in Yellowstone, we have many, but what we're mostly referring to are long-tailed and short-tailed weasels. Those are the two most common species here. It's debatable whether we have the least weasel, but we also have many other weasel family members. They include things like otters and badgers and wolverines and skunks, and all of them as a family have very powerful scent glands. So if you've ever smelled a skunk, you have an indication of what it would be like if you encountered a frightened or really scared or sadly road-killed weasel at close range. They are really potent. There are three weasel species that could be here in Yellowstone in the genus Mustela, which is the long-tailed weasel, the short-tailed weasel, and possibly the least weasel, which is known from Montana, but I'm not sure we quite have here or any good documentation of them here. They're little guys. They're the size of like a chipmunk, but still very ferocious. All three species, the long-tailed Mustela frenata, the short-tailed Mustela erminia, and the least weasel, Mustela nivalis, all turn white in winter. So in some cases, you'll hear people refer to seeing an ermine in winter, when in fact they're usually referring to any white weasel as an ermine. But technically speaking, the true ermine is the short-tailed Mustela erminia. Now in the summertime, these species are brown with white bellies. And the way to tell them apart of the species here in Yellowstone are that, the long-tailed weasels and the short-tailed, if you compare them side by side, yes, the long-tailed do have a longer tail, 40% more than the head and body length. So if you took the tail separate of the head and body, it's 44 or so percent of the body or longer. Short tails would be shorter than that, but you don't really get that chance. So one of the things you look for in the summer anyway is the coloration of, well, actually their inseam. If you could get a weasel to show you their inseam, the white belly on a long-tailed weasel goes down into the legs and stops, and so hence they have brown feet. The short-tailed weasel, the white from the body, belly that is, goes down into the inside of the legs and down into the feet, and then the feet, the socks are white. So if you see a white-footed weasel in summer, you're looking at a short tail. And all of these species are incredibly ferocious. As cute and cuddly and sweet as they look, they are vicious predators. They will eat anything. If you're a bird, they'll eat your eggs, they'll eat your chicks, they'll eat you as an adult. They eat reptiles, amphibians, moles, voles, mice, and that's actually one of the times you see them most frequently, is when they are hunting and caching those prey, and I'll come back to that in a sec. But all of these other species know how ferocious these little weasels are and want to stay clear of them. And hence, this leads into how we know that they are around. The behavior of these animals in reference to the weasels is really key to picking out that little tiny predator running around in the vegetation near your home. So on our camping trip, we just happened to be out, and Jenny spotted this weasel. We knew there was something going on by the animal behavior in the area, the birds and the mammals around us. And she caught a quick glimpse of it, and it darted into some vegetation. Well, after that, we had over an hour's worth of viewing, which is a very long time for a weasel, just because they are frenetic. Their hunting style seems to really take advantage of chaos. You know, if you've ever seen one, it's they'll go over here and then they'll come back and they'll go over here and come back and disappear, and then nobody knows where they are, and all of a sudden 20 yards away they pop up again, and hence, you know, the song "Pop Goes the Weasel." This is part of where that comes from, is they are using this distractive technique perhaps as a way to confuse and disorient prey in order to catch them. And so this is just what was going on that day as we were watching. The weasel was shooting around back and forth, in and out of vegetation, in holes in the ground and back out, and it appeared to be hunting ground squirrels. And the adult ground squirrels were a bit too big for this weasel, and in fact, in some cases, as you see here in the footage, they actually were chasing the weasel away. The weasel was probably going into the holes trying to find any juveniles or any newborns of those Uinta ground squirrels. But what was fascinating as well is, because it was relatively open, we got to see the bird activity that signaled the weasels around too. So keep in mind, the ground squirrels are angry and they're up. They're looking, you know, they're not on the ground feeding with their heads down and their bodies horizontal. Their heads and bodies are up and vertical, and they're looking, trying to figure out, and I've seen this in cases where the ground squirrels would even stand up in the tops of sagebrush sometimes to look for threats. So you may have squirrels and chipmunks and things that do similar things in your area. But the birds also are contributing to our understanding of where the weasel is at any one point in time. And what they will do is focus their attention in their scolding calls down on the weasel. And this goes for any alarm in the wild. Quite often the alarm that's going on is proportional to, and the nature of it is very similar to, the cause of the alarm. Such to say, the weasel is moving around back and forth really fast, and so you'll have this, what appears to be kind of an umbrella of alarming birds. And the height off the ground also tells you what is happening. So the weasels are going to be down on the ground, so the birds will be 3 to 5 feet, 6 feet off the ground, maybe tops, and they're focusing their alarms, but the weasel disappears. And so then the birds go quiet. And all of a sudden the weasel pops up over here, and so you see the birds move, and so you see this kind of back and forth movement of those alarming birds as they see the weasel and it goes back out of view. Read John Young's What the Robin Knows. He has a name for different shapes of alarms, the shapes that the birds and other animals make as they're alarming at these creatures. And he even has one that is called the weasel alarm, and it's just this way, which in contrast to, say, a cat that's moving through a hedgerow in your backyard. You know, the alarm tends to be moving in a linear fashion. If it's a hawk or an owl perched in a tree, that alarm will kind of be stationary and sometimes almost in a ball. So think about that as you see a bunch of birds reacting and alarming in a certain area. The nature of their movements and their location will tell you a lot about what's happening, even though you can't see what the threat is. And so you're going to only be able to recognize these things if you spend some time outside. What another great excuse to be outdoors. Even if it's in a rural or a suburban or urban environment, weasels are almost everywhere. The short-tailed weasel is found across most of the northern half of the United States and up into Canada. Same with the least weasel. The long-tailed weasel is found almost entirely throughout the United States, with some exceptions of being down in the desert Southwest, and then up into Canada some. So these guys are everywhere. They're so seldom seen, but when you do see them, holy cow, they are amazing. And what you'll never see is an overweight weasel. And this plays into some of the behavior too. The weasel is a long, skinny character, and this is an imperative for it trying to get to its prey, going down burrows and things like that. It can't afford to carry its energy reserves under its skin like, say, a bear would do. So what often happens with weasels and weasel family members of all species is that they make caches. They cache food, and this is killed prey that they will put into hollow logs or under rock outcrops, and as opposed to carrying, again, the fat under their skin and risking their ability to maneuver through, holes in the ground or tunnels in the snow, they are staying nice and sleek. And they will have this whole territory with caches throughout it that they revisit. And one of the best times to actually watch and photograph a weasel is when it is moving or establishing a cache. So you'll see them picking up dead rodents and taking them somewhere else. And they'll run right between your legs or between you and other people that are closely located to each other. It's crazy. And they'll go back and forth and back and forth. Like when they're hunting and making a cache, you'll see them wandering out into the surrounding areas and then kill something, bring it back, deposit it, go back for some more. And they are so strong. I did a study on my master's work on ruffed grouse, but one of the questions I had as part of that research was, how far do dead grouse move? Which is seemingly a crazy question, but it was a valid one in terms of trying to figure out who done it, who killed the grouse. And so we took dead grouse, put radio transmitters in them, and put cameras over them to see who grabbed them. And lo and behold, they do move. And in one case, a weasel partly consumed and then pulled down into a hole in the forest floor an entire adult grouse. The hole was about the size of a golf ball. It was tiny, and this thing, I don't know how it did it, but the incredible strength of these little wiry predators is unbelievable. And from what friends have said who study wolverines, they've seen this on the next scale up, where here's this 15, 20, 25 pound animal that is able to extract an entire dead elk from an avalanche slide. Now, I don't know if you've ever been able to examine the snow that's set up at the bottom of an avalanche slide, but when that snow comes to rest, it stops and it's about as hard as concrete. It's incredibly dense and hard and packed together in such a way that anything that's in it is really difficult to get out. And yet, these wolverines were able to fully extract entire dead elk, adult elk, from these avalanche slides. So through eating it and manipulating it, this tiny animal is able to pull that thing out of an avalanche slide. The ferocity is legendary. And in fact, other researchers have documented on cameras and through observations instances where wolverines are running off black bears, grizzly bears, mountain lions, wolves, and other big predators. A guide friend of ours happened to watch a mountain lion kill a mountain goat kid up on the side of Baronet Peak. And as the lion was starting to feed, this streak of movement went up into the area where the kill had taken place. And not really understanding what it was, not until it came streaking back out with a piece of the mountain goat kid in its mouth did they realize this was a wolverine. And so it had literally taken a piece of this mountain lion's kill away from the predator, the lion who killed it. Crazy. And so, you know, stories throughout the literature attest to how amazing these little predators can be. Ernest Thompson Seton, some of you may know his name as the one who helped start the Boy Scouts, had an account that he documented of a fellow who shot an eagle. I believe it was a bald eagle. And after it hit the ground, he went over to examine it. There, attached to the neck skin of this bald eagle, was the dried out, desiccated skull of a weasel. Whether the eagle came down to feed on a carcass that the weasel was on, or it tried to attack the weasel and the weasel counterattacked, whatever the case, here is the, the skull of that weasel still on the neck skin of that eagle. So they're ferocious, they're fearsome, they're really fascinating to watch, and they're probably in your neighborhood. So using the alarm vocalizations and behaviors that show up on the part of other mammals and birds in their surroundings, you're going to stand a lot better chance of seeing one of these little hunters. So good luck. Have fun with it. Let us know what you see. Subscribe in our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and definitely join us next week, same time, same channel, Thursday nights, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.